December 15, 2019, Los Angeles. Police enter a small apartment in a modest downtown building. Inside, there are no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no crime. Marcus, 24 years old, lies lifeless on the couch, next to a table with 2 wine glasses sewn empty, the other untouched. The TV is still on, showing Instagram's home screen. What stands out the most isn't the silence, but the overwhelming evidence of consumption. Luxury brand sneaker boxes stacked to the ceiling, clothes with tags still on, handbags, expensive colognes, brand new, unopened smartphones. In the corner, a Bluetooth speaker still playing an instrumental playlist. On the table, a bank letter. Available balance, 1.45. Next to it, envelopes with debt notices totaling over 15,000. What happened to Marcus? If you searched his name online that week, you'd find a profile of success, lifestyle influencer, personal branding expert, hundreds of thousands of followers, spotted at exclusive parties, on international trips, wearing designer clothes. In every photo, a confident smile and motivational captions. But all it took was one silent emotional collapsion no one saw. No one posted to expose the truth behind the lifestyle. Marcus wasn't buying things. He was buying meaning, belonging, validation, and he's not alone. A study by Charles Schwab revealed that 60% of millennials spend more than they can afford to maintain an image of success on social media. Another study by the APA, American Psychological Association, found that 84% of people report money as one of the greatest sources of stress in modern life, even among those with stable incomes. We live in a time where being isn't enough. You have to appear. Where emotional insecurity has become the fuel for consumerism. Where self-worth is bought in 10 installments on a credit card. And the most urgent question that no one dares to ask is, why do we need so badly to look rich in order to feel important? Have you ever felt this? Have you ever bought something you didn't need just to feel more respected, more desired, more accepted? If so, this video is for you. Here at CashPhrenia, we don't talk about skipping your morning coffee to save money. We talk about the uncomfortable truths that sabotage your relationship with money, the invisible lies that make you spend in order to fill an emotional void you didn't even know existed. Today, we're going to expose one of the most dangerous ones, the unconscious impulse to use consumption as a shield for insecurity. We'll show how the desire for status can destroy your finances and your mental health, because the problem isn't what you buy, it's what you're trying to feel when you buy it. Marcus's story doesn't begin the day he died, not even the day he posted his first luxury photo. It started years earlier with a common and silent feeling, the feeling of being invisible. As a teenager, Marcus was the kind of person who went unnoticed. He was never the most attractive, never the most popular. He came from a humble family, wore generic clothes, and had no access to what people called style. But he watched, and he learned an early and cruel lesson. People pay more attention to those who look important. It didn't take long for him to notice that when he posted a photo wearing a borrowed designer shirt, the comments changed. The number of likes went up. People started looking his way. It was as if, finally, he had found a way to be seen, to be validated, and more than that, to be respected. But this isn't just Marcus's story. It's the story of a generation. Today, we're conditioned from a young age to believe that our worth is tied to the appearance of success, not to what we actually have, but to what we seem to have. And once this belief takes root, money stops being a tool and becomes a mirror for our identity. The worst part? It doesn't happen consciously. Psychology calls this unconscious symbolic association. Throughout life, we begin to associate certain objects, brands, or symbols with desirable traits, power, intelligence, beauty, social superiority. So when we consume these symbols, we feel, even for a fleeting moment, that we're part of that group, that we are what those products represent. That's why a pair of sneakers can cost 2 months' wages, why a watch can cost as much as a car, why someone can fall into years of debt just to post a photo with a specific handbag. But the central question still echoes: why do we buy what we buy? Who are we trying to convince? Others or ourselves? In a society obsessed with appearances, spending has become a silent ritual of self-affirmation. We don't buy phones, we buy status symbols. We don't buy clothes, we buy belonging. We don't buy cars, we buy the promise of being seen as successful. But what's the real cost of this? In this video, you'll dive into a journey that blends facts, psychology, and real stories to uncover the root of this invisible impulse. We'll explore how consumption stopped being a choice and became a reflection of our fear of not being enough. And most importantly, what happens when the money we use to feel important starts to destroy us from the inside. James never intended to become a symbol. He grew up in a modest neighborhood in the southern United States, in a home where bills were paid late and brand-name clothes were distant luxuries, things from commercials or worn by the kids of more successful neighbors. From an early age, he heard the same message: study, work hard, and one day, it will all be worth it. And he believed it. At 17, he earned a partial scholarship to a mid-tier university. He worked double shifts at a convenience store to cover the rest, slept little, ate poorly, but fed a dream: to rise socially, to rise professionally, to rise enough to never feel small again. When he graduated with a degree in accounting, he got hired by a company in Manhattan. The pay was modest, but enough to rent a tiny studio in a decent area. Around him, the world felt like a different planet. Tailored suits, imported cars, luxury watches, lunches at restaurants with French names. James still wore worn-out shoes and brought a packed lunch on the subway. But he felt close, like all it would take was a little more effort to get there. And then he did. 4 years later, a promotion changed everything. New title, new salary, new environment, and with it, a new dilemma. At the first meeting with his new team, James noticed everyone wore impeccable suits. At happy hour, his co-workers ordered wines he couldn't pronounce. The conversations revolved around resorts, investments, exclusive experiences. And there he was, trying to keep up, trying to look like he belonged. The next week, he walked into a high-end clothing store, left with 2 suits and a pair of Italian shoes, all bought in 10 monthly installments. The saleswoman complimented his refined taste. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, like he mattered. That was the turning point. James began to invest in his image. Credit cards multiplied. Expensive restaurants became the norm. He bought an overpriced watch, telling himself, it's a reward. Financed a sports car to match the position. His social media began to showcase this new version. Work trips that looked like luxury vacations. Well-edited rooftop photos. Inspirational quotes about success. The problem? None of it was built on real stability. It was appearance. It was performance. It was image. But the most unsettling part is that James wasn't being fake. He truly believed he needed to look successful to be treated as such. In his mind, this wasn't vanity. It was survival. And he wasn't wrong. Social psychology research shows that our perceived status directly affects how we're treated. In controlled studies, people wearing expensive clothes are seen as more trustworthy, more competent, more intelligent. A Harvard Business School study even found that people smile differently based on what someone is wearing. Status is the new language of power. And like any language, it has its codes, its rules, its symbols. And for many, like James, those symbols became the only form of recognition. But what began as a strategy to fit in soon became an emotional trap. With each new step in his career came the pressure to upgrade his image. A new watch, a bigger apartment, a pricier restaurant, like a never-ending staircase where every step demands a bigger expense just to maintain the illusion. James didn't realize it, but his identity was slowly being absorbed by the performance. He no longer knew whether he actually liked wine or just drank it to appear sophisticated. He no longer knew if he bought suits out of necessity or out of fear of seeming less than. He no longer knew if he was truly growing or just expanding the facade. This is the trap of appearance-based social ascent. It rewards illusion. And the more you're rewarded for seeming like something, the further you drift from who you really are. This is amplified by a psychological phenomenon known as aspirational identity, a mental mechanism in which we begin to shape our behaviors, habits, and decisions based on who we want to appear to be, rather than who we truly are. That aspirational identity can even be useful as temporary motivation. But when it becomes the norm, it distorts our relationship with money, with others, and with ourselves. By the age of 35, James was finally recognized as a successful executive. But he was also emotionally drained. He slept poorly. He had anxiety attacks before social events. and secretly, he was deep in debt. The only thing growing faster than his career was the fear of being found out as just an ordinary person. In 2017, American psychologist Dr. Susan Whitbourne conducted a study with 800 adults from different age groups. The goal: to understand the psychological impact of debt on human behavior. The results were alarming. People in debt showed significantly higher levels of depression, anxiety, and loss of identity. But the most disturbing finding was this: more than half of them continued to spend compulsively even while fully aware of their financial ruin. The fall, therefore, is not just financial, it's psychological. Take the case of Juliana, a 27-year-old woman who went viral on social media for showcasing her luxury lifestyle, all fueled by just 2 credit cards. When the facade began to crumble, she revealed in an interview that even when she was broke, she kept buying expensive shoes. "It was the only way I could feel special," she said. This behavior is explained by a phenomenon called cognitive dissonance, when our values clash with our actions. And instead of changing our behavior, we distort reality to justify the mistake. Juliana knew she couldn't afford to spend, but she told herself things like, "Just this month. I deserve it. It's an investment in my image." And with that, she sank deeper and deeper, because emotional spending creates a vicious cycle. The more we spend to feel better, the more we need to keep spending to sustain the illusion. And the brain adapts. It builds reward pathways tied to the act of purchasing, literally releasing dopamine every time we swipe the card. At that point, the fall becomes inevitable. James, Juliana, Marcus, 3 people, 3 different contexts. But one common pattern: they all confused identity with image and worth with validation. This is the most expensive psychological mistake of modern life. It's not a logical error, it's an emotional one. And worse, it's invisible, because it doesn't show up suddenly. It forms like a silent crack in the foundation of self-esteem. And it all starts with an ancient need to be accepted. For thousands of years, our survival depended on being accepted by the group. Rejection meant death. Our brains evolved accordingly. We developed hypersensitive social sensors. We need belonging the same way we need food. But today, the group isn't the tribe anymore. It's the feed, the neighborhood, the corporate elevator. And acceptance is no longer based on utility, it's measured by symbols. What we wear, where we eat, what we drive, what we post. We are a generation emotionally trained to seek recognition through visual signals. And that recognition works like a mild drug. It creates dopamine spikes. Quick reward, instant validation. The problem? This drug builds tolerance. The more you consume, the less effect it has, and the more you need. More brands, more upgrades, more spending. Because what made you feel seen yesterday already feels ordinary today. And that's not a coincidence, it's neuroscience. The human brain suffers from a phenomenon called hedonic adaptation. The tendency to return to our emotional baseline after an achievement. That's why the happiness of buying something new fades quickly. The nervous system adjusts. And once it adjusts, it demands more. More stimulation, more exclusivity, more prestige, more validation. That's when social comparison bias kicks in, a concept described by Leon Festinger in the 1950s, now more relevant than ever. The nearly automatic urge to measure our worth by looking sideways, not based on values, but on people. And the problem is, there will always be someone with more expensive, newer, prettier, more desirable. And when that someone shows up in your field of vision, whether on Instagram or in the office, your brain, without asking your permission, activates a feeling of inadequacy, even if nothing has changed in your actual life. This is the invisible cycle of material frustration. You buy to feel better. But when you see someone with something better, what you bought feels smaller. So you buy again, and it starts all over. Emotional consumption, at this point, stops being a choice and becomes a compulsion. But make no mistake, this isn't just a personal issue, it's structural. We live in a culture built on the logic of emotional scarcity. We're bombarded with messages saying, "You're not enough yet, but you could be if you buy this." And that activates a cognitive bias known as psychological scarcity bias. The false perception that we're always missing something, that we're falling behind, and that the only way to feel whole is to consume what we lack. This bias distorts our decision-making. It makes us accept unthinkable debt, finance what we don't need, go into debt just to avoid looking like we're in debt. It's a theater of masks, and the ticket is sold in 12 interest-free installments. And behind it all, there's a silent trauma, the belief that without status symbols, we have no value. That's what traps us. It's not the debt, it's the shame. It's not the lack of money, it's the fear of no longer being someone worth seeing. So how do we get out of this? First, by recognizing that this psychological error is universal. All of us have fallen into the trap of buying to appear, of exaggerating to impress, of hiding an insecurity with an object. But the second step is even more important. Deconstructing the logic that value comes from the outside. You can drive a simple car and still be a role model. You can wear something cheap and still be respected. You can flaunt nothing and still carry a presence that inspires. This isn't self-help, it's behavioral neuroscience. Studies show that people with a strong internal sense of identity are less susceptible to the pull of symbolic status. They make decisions with more clarity. They suffer less from social anxiety, and they're more financially consistent. True strength isn't in looking rich. It's in not needing to prove anything. In the end, Marcus's story ended in tragedy. James's, in emotional burnout. Juliana's, in painful deconstruction. But your story is still being written. And what all of these cases show us is that the problem was never money itself. Money is just a means, a piece of paper, a code. The real conflict lies in what we're trying to solve with it, in the unhealed wounds, the unnamed voids, the insecurities we try to mask with labels. That's why it's not enough to just say, spend less. This isn't just about financial control. It's about recognizing an emotional and psychological pattern that quietly governs our decisions. And only after seeing that pattern can we begin to break it. But how do we do that? How do we stop consuming to appear and start living with more awareness, purpose, and freedom? Up next, 3 essential lessons, practical, yet profound, to help you break free from the cycle of bought validation and rebuild your relationship with money and with yourself. Before any purchase, pause, breathe. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, what am I trying to feel with this purchase? Not what you're buying, but what you're emotionally seeking behind it. Belonging? Respect? Validation? Security? If the answer is yes, understand this. None of those things are truly sustained by consumption. The relief is short, the bill is long, and the pain returns sometimes, even worse. Make this a habit. Not an act of self-judgment, but a sincere investigation. Because self-awareness is the most powerful antidote to emotional spending. You grew up learning that status is synonymous with appearance, with symbols, with external recognition. But what if status is something else? What if status is the freedom to say no? What if it's the peace of owing nothing to anyone? What if it's not needing others' approval to feel whole? Redefining status is a choice rooted in internal value. And it begins when you stop using comparison as a measure of self-worth. Stop measuring your life with someone else's ruler. Remember, on social media, everyone looks happier, richer, more successful. But no one posts the credit card bill. No one shows the insomnia. No one shares the fear. Comparison is an illusion custom-made to fuel frustration. You don't need to compete. You need to align with what truly matters to you. When your identity is rented through symbols, you live for appearances. When it's built from within, you live from essence. Invest in building something money can't buy. Real knowledge, not just certificates, but deep understanding. Emotional presence, the ability to be fully present in your relationships. Inner discipline, the capacity to act, even when no one is watching. Personal purpose, a true north that doesn't shift with every new trend. These are your real assets. And when you have them, you don't need to prove anything with a watch or a brand. Because the one person who truly matters already sees your worth. You, the raw truth. We live in an era where consumption has become an emotional language, where the appearance of success matters more than actually building it, and where many are going emotionally bankrupt just to pay the price of looking successful. But there is another way, a path that's quieter, Less glamorous at first glance, but infinitely more stable, coherent, and powerful. The path of conscious authenticity. And that path begins the moment you understand. You don't need to look rich to be valuable. You don't need to prove anything to be respected. And you don't need to consume to feel whole. Financial freedom begins with emotional freedom. And emotional freedom begins when you realize that you are not what you have. You are who you are. And that's what defines your true wealth. Now I want to hear from you. What was the most emotional purchase you've ever made? One that wasn't about necessity, but about trying to feel better. Maybe it was a gift to impress someone, an outfit to look more confident, a car to silence an insecurity. Did you regret it afterward? Or did it help you understand something deeper about yourself? Share your story in the comments. It might open the eyes of someone else who's stuck in the same cycle without even realizing it. And if this video helped you see money from a new perspective, consider subscribing to CashPhrenia. Here, we don't talk about spreadsheets. We talk about behavior, about the mind, about identity. We expose the invisible traps that lead you to sabotage your financial life and show you how to break free. Because understanding your relationship with money is the first step toward mastering your freedom. See you in the next episode.